Ladies and gentlemen, many of you looking at the spectacle of the world around you, at the amount of destruction, horror, and suffering to be seen everywhere, at the apparent sweeping triumph of evil and the apparent helplessness of innocence and virtue, may find yourselves drawn irresistibly to the conclusion that the world is controlled by some diabolically clever, all but omnipotent evil power, capable of winning any and every battle against the good. Without necessarily naming it in words, you may feel that such inherently is the nature of life, that evil will always prove more practical and powerful than virtue, and that the good has no chance on earth. This, of course, is the essential view of existence held by all mystical moralities, the moralities that teach that man is born to suffer, that this earth is a realm to be escaped, that virtue must be content to be its own reward, that happiness is only possible beyond the grave, and that to seek or to achieve happiness in this world is proof of one's depravity, since only the depraved can profit in this life, and only the evil is practical. You who are here tonight would not accept the mystics' nonsense about another dimension or any of their promises of a self-fulfillment to be achieved by death. But to those among you who have succumbed to the feeling that only evil is practical on earth, to those of you who feel that there is an omnipotent monster running loose in the world, I want to say that that monster is in fact an impotent, panic-stricken little nonentity whose only source of strength, of power, of efficacy is you. In order to understand in what manner this is true, it is necessary first clearly to define what is evil, to identify its precise nature and meaning. It is your concept of the nature of evil that will determine your attitude toward it, that will determine whether what you feel for evil is fear or contempt. Evil, according to the mystics' doctrine of original sin, is that which man is by nature. It is that within him which pulls his soul downward toward the pursuit of earthly enjoyment. Evil, according to that tradition which has moved from the Orient to such mystery cults as the Orphics of ancient Greece, to Pythagoras, to Plato, to St. Paul, to St. Augustine, is the lust for this earth, the quest for pleasure, the pursuit of sexual enjoyment, the pursuit of happiness, of production, of trade, of profit, of wealth. Evil is, above all, arrogance, pride, the conviction that one's mind, unaided by divine revelation or insight, is competent to discover the truth. Mystics do not begin, as one rationally must, with the definition of the good by which they then define the evil. They begin instead with the standard of evil by which they then define the good. Their whole concept of good consists of a negation. The good is non-man, non-life on earth, non-profit, non-reason. It is significant in this respect that their cardinal virtue is self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is a negation, the wiping out, the surrendering, the renouncing of one's values, one's happiness, one's life, one's mind. In this sense, they regard evil metaphysically as active and the good as passive. By such a concept of good and evil, it is certainly true that virtue is impractical and vice is practical. The practical means that which is appropriate to the conditions of reality, that which works, succeeds, brings man happiness, profit, and fulfillment. If it is a vice to use one's mind and a virtue to renounce it, if it is a vice to produce but a virtue to be in need, if it is a vice to achieve values but a virtue to forsake them, if it is a vice to be happy but a virtue to suffer, then most certainly the evil is practical and virtue has no chance on earth. But such, in fact, are not the evils which people believe to be practical. The consequence of the mystics' creed that removed morality from life has been to lead men to the belief that actual evils, such as dishonesty, robbery, brutality, are practical. The real alternative to the mystics' morality of death, the morality of life, has never been grasped by men. Failing to think outside the context of the mystics' definitions, they have concluded that if it is moral to place one's faith in the authority of God, it is practical to place one's faith in private whims. That if it is moral to give one's wealth away, it is practical to obtain wealth by force. that if it is moral to sacrifice oneself to others, it is practical to sacrifice others to oneself. That if it is moral to be a masochist, it is practical to be a sadist. Men have so divorced the concept of morality from the practical problems of existence that if one were to tell them that the alleged virtues of the mystics are not moral, but rationality, honesty, justice, productiveness are, many might agree, but then, still caught in the mystic's trap, they would proceed to feel that rationality, honesty, justice, and productiveness are impractical, since the moral can have no chance on earth. Morality has become for them virtually a stigma. To call an action moral is, no matter what its nature, to brand it as impractical. If you wish to avoid this error, if you wish fully to understand what is good and evil, you must reject the basic approach of the mystics. You must remember that a rational morality, a morality proper to man's nature, is the tool not of man's destruction, but of his survival. That man needs a moral code for the most practical purpose possible in order to live. What is the definition of the good by objectivist ethics? It is that which supports man's survival, that which furthers and enhances man's existence, that which makes possible the achievement of life and the enjoyment of life. The purpose of morality, states Galt, is to teach you not to suffer and die, but to enjoy yourself and live. As I have said, only if one begins with a definition of the good can one rationally arrive at a definition of the evil. Only if one begins with a definition of one's basic goal or purpose can one judge what furthers that purpose or defeats it. Life is man's basic moral purpose, and the good is all that which human survival requires. What then is the evil? It is the anti-life. What does man's life depend on? First and foremost, upon reason, upon the perception of reality and adherence to reality. The essence of evil, then, is willful blindness to reality. It is defiance of the facts of reality. To give a simple illustration, if a man recklessly drives his car 100 miles an hour down an icy road, deliberately risking his life and that of the other passengers who are with him, for no other purpose than the thrill of seeing if he can get away with being flagrantly irrational, this is most profoundly evil. Evil because it is anti-reality, anti-reason, and therefore anti-life. The moral is the rational, the evil is the irrational. And remember that this means that the moral is that which is in accordance with reality, and the evil is that which attempts to go against the facts of reality. Within man's consciousness, the issue of good and evil consists of a single choice, the only basic choice open to man, to think or not to think, to perceive reality or to evade the responsibility of perceiving it. To quote Galt, quote, "Thinking is man's only basic virtue from which all the others proceed, and his basic vice, the source of all his evils, is that nameless act which all of you practice but struggle never to admit, the act of blanking out, the willful suspension of one's consciousness, the refusal to think, not blindness but the refusal to see, not ignorance, but the refusal to know. It is the act of unfocusing your mind and inducing an inner fog to escape the responsibility of judgment, on the unstated premise that a thing will not exist if only you refuse to identify it, that A will not be A so long as you do not pronounce the verdict, it is. Non-thinking is an act of annihilation, a wish to negate existence, an attempt to wipe out reality. But existence exists. Reality is not to be wiped out. It will merely wipe out the wiper." Close quote. All the evils which you see around you, the bewildering contradictions in people's behavior, the dishonesties, the acts of cruelty, of destruction, of expropriation, of torture, of murder, proceed from and are made possible only by the evasions and blankouts of the guilty parties, by their willful suspension of their minds, their blind surrender to blind emotions, their rejection of reason and existence. Evil is self-made blindness. In order to make oneself evil, one has first to make oneself stupid. All the values required for man's survival have to be achieved by virtues. Food, shelter, clothing, happiness, and self-esteem all necessitate positive actions that man must perform. First the action of thinking, then the action of translating one's thought into physical form. Virtue does not consist of a negation. It does not consist of passivity or resignation or renunciation or self-sacrifice. It consists